Mr. Chair, we're now live.
Very much. Due to the COVID-19 emergency declaration, this meeting of the General Government Committee is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members of council in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference, and town staff are available throughout the meeting if council members have any questions on the agenda. For members of the public watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties throughout the meeting. I would now call this meeting to order. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas. More specifically, the Mississaugas of Scugog and Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action in acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm officially calling this meeting to order. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests? Seeing none, we have the minutes of the regular meeting of December 13th, 2021. Are there any questions on the meeting, on the minutes? Seeing none, can I get a mover to approve the minutes?
I'll move it.
Moved by Regional Councillor Lee. Any opposed? All is in favor, this motion carries. Since there was no closed session meeting on the last meeting we had, we'll move directly onto the consent agenda. The following items have been pulled for discussion: 4.1 by Mayor Collier, by Councillor Bauer, and by Regional Councillor Dice. Councillor Bauer was the first to pull it, and 5.1 was pulled by Regional Councillor Dice. Are there any other items that members want to pull for discussion?
Move the
There were no
ballot.
other items. Okay, so all those in favor? Any opposed? None. This motion carries. We will start now. 4.1, Councillor Bauer, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Happy New Year, everybody. Yes, thank you for this report to Mr. Hannon, for sure. A lot of work went into this, and I appreciate it because, you know, funny enough, since I've become a councillor, I've received several emails about a backyard chicken program. Can we do it? How could it be done? What would it look like? And if you remember the report in September, in the staff report, it was recommended that if we directed council staff, that they would come back to us with this report. So I think it was important to have this information and make to see how it works. So I'm happy it happened. I don't think it is the time right now for this type of program, and I think there was a lot of interest or comments about it, both for and against. So I mostly wanted to acknowledge the amount of work that went into this and say thank you for the information. And so I don't have any questions. I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Mayor Collier?
Actually, not much to add, Chair. I'll just leave it as thanking staff for looking into this. I did support just looking into it and seeing the viability of the project, but I am going to support the 56.5% of Ajax residents that do not want to see this project go forward. Thank you.
You're welcome. Regional Councillor Dice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one question for staff, and it was on page 11 where there's some bullets. And it spoke to ensuring eggs are only used for personal consumption and not for sale or gifting. And I wondered if you could clarify what you meant by gifting.
Through the chair to Councillor Dice, thank you for the question. Gifting means that they wouldn't be gifting it to their neighbors or anybody else within the community. They're for personal consumption only.
So has there been an issue with this in other municipalities? I understand why you're not raising them to sell, but to be able to give them to your friends or family, I don't understand if there was a pre-existing condition.
So the position would be that there's no sanitary provision on these eggs and giving them out to other people may promote illness issues. So the position was that the eggs that are generated within the property should only stay with those residents and not be given out to friends and family.
Gotcha. Thank you. The other question too, I think it mentioned in the report that through the pilot project, if a resident lost a chicken, you know, if it passed away, whatever, that they could not replace it. But then again, I learned from your report also that they need to have other chickens around them for that, you know, social development, so to speak. So how would that work if you only had 2 chickens and you lose one? Are they then basically getting out of the program?
Again, through the chair to Councillor Dias. No, the provisions that dealt with not replacing is if council decided after the end of the trial program or sometime during the trial program that they didn't want to continue, it would be from that point forward, no one could continue replacing existing chickens. But while the program was up and running, people could go from 3 to 2 and then back up to 4 if they wanted to within the program.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank
Thank
you. Those are my questions.
You're welcome. I have a couple of questions from members. Councillor Tyler Morin, you first.
Yep, very quickly, I only have one question. Can staff, I can't find it on the report. I read the whole report, very thorough report on chickens. Can staff please comment just briefly on the fact that no other, it's correct, right? No other municipality in Durham Region is doing this. Is that correct? Can you just confirm that for those that are listening? And as I sift through the report, I know I read that. I think I read that. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Rob Tyler Moran, no one else in the region is currently having a backyard chicken program at this time.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Regional Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. This question is to the clerk regarding data collection. So we used IMO, and it just, you know, like the common joke was that, oh, like, you know, the people who were for the chickens, it was the same 6 people who submitted 500, you know, submissions for it. I don't think that's the case, but how do we ensure that it's individual submissions for our data collection?
Through the chair to Councillor Lee, to be honest, I'd have to speak with corporate communications about what's happening on the back end there. I don't know exactly how we verify that individual responses are from different people. I'd have to circle back to you on that.
Okay, it would be helpful if you don't mind, and it necessarily, you can send an email even, but I am curious of just like a lot of, we're basing our decisions on a lot of the statistical data that's provided from the IMO. I just want to make sure that data is as quote unquote clean as possible and not like skewered one way or the other by, you know, fanatical people who feel very strongly about this for or against. So, I mean, we'll probably be using IMO going forward for a lot of different public feedback, and I just want to make sure that data is good. So thank you for getting back to us, and thank you, Chair.
You are welcome. Are there any other questions on 4.1? I see none. Can I get a mover to adopt the recommendation of these reports? Moved by Mayor Collier. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, this motion carries. Thank you very much. Just to confirm, was there any polls on 4.2? I don't have it in my records. No, there was no poll. Okay, wonderful. So from then on, we'll just move on to discussions. The discussion is about report number LIS 2020-02, Waterfront Parking Management Program, review of first season and proposed program changes. Would staff like to have a discussion on this first before we go into questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if you'll indulge me, I did have some opening remarks, if that's okay.
Please proceed, Ms. McCord.
Thank you. So I just wanted to sort of set the table a little bit for this discussion. And in doing so, I thought it might be useful to just take a moment to revisit the context within which this program was originally conceived. So, you know, why did it come about? What was the impetus? What were the goals? And you might recall that at that time, it was really because the waterfront was overcrowded on weekends in the summer, and that crowding was driven in large part by visitors to Ajax, to the point that many Ajax residents felt it was actually inhibiting their ability to enjoy that amenity. And at the same time, the bylaw division and likely council members were being just overwhelmed with complaints from residents of the waterfront feeder streets about how out of control parking was on their streets. And then there was other problem behaviors such as bonfires, alcohol use, litter that were escalating on the waterfront, and with them, the town's cost to manage those issues. And so this program was really intended to introduce measures that would help mitigate against that overcrowding and ensure that visitors from outside of Ajax who are using the waterfront would share in the costs of its management and relieve some of that burden from Ajax taxpayers. So the waterfront management program was implemented for the first time in 2021, and it's really just a key component of the broader waterfront management strategy, which is now more proactive than ever before in Ajax history, I would think, really just in recognition of how beautiful and popular the Ajax waterfront is and has become over time. So we've since conducted a review of the parking program, and we are recommending a number of adjustments which are outlined in the staff report. And I just do want to flag for you that there are some items addressed in the report that I know were of interest to members of council, where we've provided you with some information and some options, but where staff aren't necessarily recommending program changes. So I just wanted to draw your attention to those in case you're interested in a discussion about them. I'd also just like to make sort of a few high-level comments about what I think we can take out of the review that was conducted, and in particular, the public feedback. First and foremost, the survey results really reaffirm for me that council's desire to see the waterfront more actively managed in a way that prioritizes Ajax residents was really bang on and reflective, I think, of what your constituents want to see. The public are overwhelmingly in favor of the core tenets of this program. And I'll just point to a few of the survey outcomes. So 90% of respondents to the survey felt that Ajax residents should be able to park for free at the waterfront. And 73% believe that non-residents, visitors to the waterfront, should not be able to park for free. And 83% of survey respondents believe that it is necessary for the town to take steps to manage the increased usage of the waterfront. And I would just also note that a sizable majority of residents also reported seeing improvements in 2021 in terms of their ability to enjoy the waterfront when compared to previous years. So that's certainly not to say there isn't room for improvement to this program. I know there were some growing pains with season one, some things we can do better. There's, of course, always room for improvement. And I think we'll see this program evolve over time. And that's really exactly what we're trying to accomplish with the recommendations that are before you today. I do want to offer my thanks to the 1,300 people who took the time to provide us with feedback on the program through the survey, and also those who have emailed the bylaw division and their council member with different observations and thoughts on how we can improve the program. It's been really, really helpful and very much valued. So I'll just wrap up by saying that in my mind, this program is one of the more significant policy decisions that this council has made over the last 3 years. It's really a hallmark decision of the term. And in my opinion, history will look on it favorably. On the face of it, it's a parking permit program, but at its core, I think this was really a policy decision about how we balance costs between taxpayers of Ajax and visitors to Ajax. And it's also a policy decision that recognizes the town's rising costs to manage its amenities and then presents a solution for that is consistent with this council's desire to generate non-tax revenue so that rising costs don't always leave Ajax taxpayers, holding the bag. So as you probably know as well, I'll just mention Ajax staff have been contacted by a number of other municipalities, some very close by, who are looking to or have recently decided to implement a program just like ours. So I think that also reaffirms the wisdom of what we've done here. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Derek and I are here to answer your questions, and we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Director Cooper. For discussion now, questions, Regional Councillor Dice.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper, for all the work that this program has entailed for you and your staff, and to Mr. Hannon as well. I know it wasn't easy. I'm really, really pleased that you've reviewed it and appreciate that. I like the fact that you've come up with a fee schedule, which is a little more fair system or affordable system for people, you know, who perhaps only want to bring their children to the playground for a couple of hours, 3 hours. So you have $10 for 3 hours, you have $20 for a full day. And that was a big issue for me personally, because I want through COVID or any other time really for people to be able to have access to public parks. I know I enjoy public parks in many different municipalities, not just my own. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you making some changes to streets that we're managing, that were part of that management program. But I just wanted to speak to the hangar permits. So I had a number of calls from people who live near the lake. And, you know, these properties are larger, they're older properties, they're larger, there is more parking available. And many of them do have throughout the summer some kind of a gathering. Particularly the one woman I spoke to, retired persons who, you know, once a year they get together to see each other. And they had the property that could facilitate that. So I'm thinking, you know, it's few and far between, but there are some of those people that want to be able to have visitors come. And I know Councillor Bauer had some of those calls as well. And I think that it's something that we should consider, the hanging permits. Like I say, I don't think it's going to take up a lot of parking on a lot of occasions, but people down by the lake, you know, they do have that space available down there, and they do feel that they have a right to have visitors come without having to pay for that parking on those special occasions, whether it's anniversary, birthday, whatever. So I would like you really to consider that. Thank you.
Director Cooper, was there any response to Regional Councillor Dais?
Sure, I'll make a few comments. Thank you. Yeah, so I think we've provided some information on this in the report. Certainly something we can do. We talked about the possibility to do it as a door hanger program. If it was council's desire to implement some sort of relief program for those residents, we would work with the vendor to see if there's a more sophisticated way to do it that could be done through the online system that doesn't necessarily involve paper and mirror hangers. But that would be something we'd look into. Really, today, we're looking more for just sort of the philosophical decision on whether council's interested in a relief program, and then we can take it from there and have something appropriate implemented in time for the season. We did, you know, flag some considerations within the report, namely just the fact that there's programs throughout or areas throughout the whole town where there are on-street parking restrictions, you know, people who might live in a school zone or on a 90-degree bend or on a bus route, where parking on the street is not available to them because of where they live. And so I think this could lead to questions about, you know, whether people who live in those areas are entitled to relief as well when they have visitors. So just something to consider, but from a practical perspective, it's certainly something that we can implement if council desires to do so.
Thank you, Director Cooper. Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Just wondering, going to a $10 3-hour permit, how are staff going to be able to monitor that and differentiate between those that have a full day and those that only have a 3-hour? Are we going to be having staff do more work shocking tires and that type of thing?
Through the chair, to your worship, no, we wouldn't. Our computer system that we have now for our handheld ticketing units would be able to differentiate between the types of permits issued.
Okay, so this is not adding a lot more work to staff to manage this change.
The only increase would be staff's time having to patrol the streets a little bit more often with vehicles that we recognize may have a 3-hour permit versus an entire day permit.
Right, okay. That's fine. The 2 extra streets, Faro and the other one, this is, as Director Cooper said, a very successful program. And I think people have started to get used to it now. By the end of last season, we gave leeway at the beginning. And I think the fact that people are used to it now, I wonder why we would be making a change like that, removing those 2 streets. I could almost guarantee that people are going to be creeping that one street over for free parking at the first opportunity as soon as they realize that that's been removed. Can you speak to that, please, Mr. Hannon?
Thank you, through the chair. So we did the review. We told council at the beginning of the 2021 season that we would be monitoring activities on the streets. And what we found is that those streets had very insignificant issues that we were reporting, and they are pushed far enough away that we believe from the waterfront that they wouldn't become an alternate to somebody to say that I'd be willing to park and walk. There may be issues on special events if we get back into large grouping special events, but right now the day-to-day activities on the waterfront for Saturdays and Sundays didn't warrant those streets at this time, in our opinion. But we always hold the right that we could go back and put it back if necessary. But one of the commitments we did make to council is to review the street list that we were looking at.
Will that require a council resolution to add that back, or will staff be able to just add back if we start getting complaints and it's seen that it's needed?
We would have to pass back a bylaw to amend the traffic bylaw to put those streets back on, but it would just be one council report that we would write just to amend the traffic bylaw.
Okay, so will you be doing another review, say, next June?
We're constantly reviewing these particular streets, but if we recognize come June that there's an issue, we could write that report in at that time, yes.
Okay, I won't be getting the complaints, I hope, but the local and regional councilors might. And I don't know, it just seems to me that people are getting used to it. It's not a problem. I don't really see the point in changing it. People don't like change. I don't really like change. I mean, if they're used to it, I'll leave it up to you, but I suspect we might be adding those in because I think we will see that creep. Just to the permit or the exception that we talked about, I'm trying to justify in my head the need for that, given that we have our temporary parking permitting system. And for those rare occasions that somebody has guests that are here for longer term, I mean, they can just pull one of those permits. Can you just refresh that for me? Is it 5 per house or is it 5 per license plate?
Through your worship, you're right. It's 5 per license plate, free, and 12 paid. However, to ensure that the permit system for the waterfront is effective, one of the conditions is OUPP permits are not valid within those streets during those times as outlined on the signs.
So would that not be an easier way to work this rather than worry about another, whether it be a window hanger or some other way to register or monitor these vehicles, just make that permitting system applicable to those areas during those restricted times?
The issue then, we still deal with the fact that there could be a multitude of individuals coming into town from outside town that would be utilizing those permits for the purposes of visiting the waterfront and not for visiting individuals on those streets.
Okay. Again, one off my personal opinion, I don't see the need for it right now. I think it's probably an exception, not a rule. And we do allow the residents, as Councillor Dyes said, these are larger areas, large double driveways for the majority on a lot of those homes on these streets. These are not the small driveways can only accommodate one car. Some of those can accommodate 6 or 8 cars. I really don't see this warranting the extra work I think that will be required to monitor it. So I'm not a big supporter of that, but I will support the other recommendations. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions on this topic? Councillor Bauer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report. I'm glad to see it. I'm very happy to see the considerations that were made regarding the price point and removing some of the streets or reviewing, because Mr. Hannon's right, that is exactly what we said, that we would review all of the streets and make changes as we thought were necessary. And I do agree with Councillor Dyes about allowing the opportunity for residents down there, if they need the parking permits, a couple of extra ones or whatever it's determined to be, that there should be access to that type. I actually had forgotten that OUPP, the overnight parking permit, that is not applicable for the waterfront management parking plan. Is that what you just said, Mr. Hannon?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, so it's a completely different program. So just an example of something that, an example that I received from a resident who lived down there who coaches soccer. And sometimes after a hot, sweaty day or tournament, they say, you know, why don't you come over and we'll have a little team swim or a team barbecue. And it's Saturday or Sunday or a holiday Monday. And then all of a sudden they're restricted to doing that because they might fit a couple cars on their driveway, but then everybody else would have to pay $20, which means it's no longer a fun little barbecue for these soccer teams who aren't going to visit the waterfront. They're going to visit someone's home. So I think that's something that, just an example of something to think about. And then as far as other streets in the town that have restrictions, I completely understand that. But I think this is a seasonal restriction that's put on these residents at the height of the peak period of when they would want to have their company. So I think it's a little bit different for, you know, knowing that these restrictions apply for parking. So anyway, that's a ramble for agreeing with Councillor Dyes. So I did see that we have an option in the report here, or just a suggestion about putting forth a direction to look at options for this type of guest parking permit. So if this is the time to do that, then I would like to put that forward, please. That we consider maybe if the paper program is too difficult, or people are worried about people just copying them, then as Director Cooper said, there are ways to speak with the vendor to maybe there's a different solution there. So I think I would like to put that forward, please, that we consider that for this year's program.
Very well. Is there an amendment to be made to this, or we can just go forward and vote for this?
Mr. Chair, I can bring up some wording on screen that would facilitate an amendment.
Thank you. Is that looking good for you, Councillor Bauer? That clause number 1 be amended by adding the following: implementation of a relief program for waterfront residents that would permit on-street parking for guests.
I think that covers it. I would ask Regional Councillor Dyes, since we are the ward councillors, am I missing anything there, Joanne?
I don't think so, because it was pretty well laid out in the material that we received in the report. So, you know, if there's something that staff needs to look at to do it a little bit differently to make it more efficient, that would be appreciated. But yeah, we need something that residents can access for those special events.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Yes, that's sufficient.
Okay, you're welcome. Questions on the amendment, Mayor Collier?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Hannon and Ms. Cooper. Just to be clear, so if this passes, directing staff to just go ahead and decide whether this is going to be a hanger, a mirror hanger, or an electronic or some other, and just proceed. But this won't come back to council with regards to cost or anything else.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the mayor, I don't think the cost would be significant. We're going to be looking at some software changes anyways to implement some of the other changes here, like the change to the fee. So there will be a cost to making some changes there, but I think this would be probably insignificant. It wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't be coming back to council because of the cost of implementing something like this. I think we would maybe need to turn our minds to whether council needs to be engaged again as we develop this program. We've sort of provided a description of how we think it can be done in the report, but again, we have a little bit more work to do to figure out what is the optimal way to roll out something like this. When we start to turn our minds to, how many additional permits per household would be appropriate, I think we probably would value council's feedback on those types of things, whether that's done informally or at a council meeting, I'm not sure, but I suspect we'll be, engaging with you at some point, either informally or formally, to get a little bit more feedback from you on how we roll this out.
Okay, and however you decide to roll this out, whether it be a window hanger or a mirror hanger or whichever, people will have to contact the town and register. You're not just going to give 2 window hangers to every household down there.
No, I think it could be the latter. That was sort of consistent with what Derek and I talked about. If you happen to be a registrant whose address falls on one of those streets, that you would have probably 2, 3, 4 extra permits available to you that you could pick up at town hall. But again, details we'd have to work through. Derek, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree. I think the belief is that if it was put into place, that it would be per resident.
Okay, so this is where it gets a little foggy to me. If we're going to so we've got the system that works, and using your words, big success. Okay, worked well. Now we're going to take away a couple of the streets, lower the amount, which are 2 things that are nice, but not really necessary, since we have a system that works and works well and is only still in its infancy. It's just not even started its 2nd year yet. And now we want to potentially blanket the neighborhood in free parking permits. I'm sorry, but I do not have as much faith as some in behavior. I see that as being counterproductive. I mean, if it was something that a resident had to apply for on a per basis, I mean, we're having a big gathering, we need this, great. But to just give, I mean, I don't see this as being a big problem last year. On the example that Councillor Bauer used, I don't see that as being for maybe 1 or 2 households might be a regular event, but for the other few thousand households, probably not a regular event. So I don't know why we would be giving all these. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. I can't support it on that basis. If you can tell me another way that this is why I asked if it would come back to council, maybe I could. But if that's the way we're talking about doing it, is maybe just allowing everybody to have X number, I can't support that.
Thank you, Mayor. Regional Councillor Dice.
Thank you. And perhaps maybe staff could comment on that, because maybe it's not unlike the overnight parking permit, where people have to think a little bit ahead if they're going to be having some sort of an event and have to call the town to get their permit rather than just issuing them to everybody. So maybe that's part of something you look at in the report. Is that possible?
Sure, I think we could look at something like that and come back to council. So maybe the amendment, Councillor Bauer, is just to direct staff to come back with more details on exactly how such a relief program would be designed.
Thank you, Director. Yes, that's a good idea.
I will just add, some of these changes do require software changes that can take some time to implement. So we'll probably be back in February looking for direction. And if we really get much past February without a decision on that, it might just be difficult to implement something in time for the next season, but it should be doable in that time frame. Derek, are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that. Again, I think part of the system being set up, if it's going to be a management system through staff, that does put some work onto our resources if we have to start waiting all the permit requests.
Okay, we can move forward now. With the amendment to the amendment, Mayor Collier, is this somewhere happy you can meet with the councillors, and Councillor Tyler Moore will get you in there right after. I just want to make sure that we get this over with.
Oh, I
I'm
just
committed.
took that as I just figured the mover would take that as a friendly, but sure.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure we cleared that. Thank you very much. Councillor Tyler Moran, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chair, I'm just wanting clarification, but it kind of now we're going to be hearing about this in the future council meetings, so I'm sure it'll come out. But just so I'm understanding, if somebody's having a get together on a Saturday and you live down by the lake, right now, if somebody was to park in front of your house, they would pay $10 for 3 hours. Is that correct? Or with the, it's trying to get a little bit confusing here, or with the part-time, the other, I'm losing my words here, the other parking permits that we can apply for, 12 a year or whatever, 17, you got to pay for it, all this. That, like, how does that work? But this amendment would say that you could get these for free. Like, it seems, maybe I should just wait till we hear back for the future, because I'm not really saying this properly, but I'm a little confused there.
Director Cooper, would you like to clarify anything for Councillor Tyler Moran?
What is being asked is what I'm saying.
Right. So, Councillor Tyler Moran, the OUPP program, the 5 free permits per year, is not available to residents that live on the streets that are governed by the waterfront permit program. So you're correct that as of right now, if they have guests on the days that those streets are controlled, so Saturdays and Sundays and holidays during the summer, if they cannot accommodate them on their own property and they need to park on the road, then yes, they must pay the fee, or the owner of the house can just put their permanent vehicles on the road in order to accommodate their guests on their own property. But if they have too many guests that they can't do that, then yes, those guests would be in for payment of the fee. What Councillor Bauer is proposing here is that we come back with more details on how we could enable people having large numbers of guests who live on those streets to accommodate those guests on the road without having to pay the permit fee.
Okay, and now you're going to go look at that and come back to us with the details if that was to happen, etc. Okay, thank you. Sorry if my question sounded too remedial, but I was just confused. Thank you.
No, it helped me a lot too, Councillor Tyler Moran. Thank you very much for asking that question. So before we vote on this, I just want to reread the amendment to this report so we can all be clear on what we're voting for. So the amendment moved by Councillor L. Bauer, that the motion be amended by adding the following clause: that staff be directed to prepare an implementation plan for a relief program for waterfront residents that could permit on-street parking for guests, and present it to a future meeting of council or the appropriate standing committee for council's consideration. So that's the latest update to it. All those in favor of this amendment to the report? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This passes. Thank you very much. And now
Thank
to,
you.
no, you're welcome. And moving on to, so there's no more questions on this report, correct? I see, Mayor Collier. Yes, sir.
I just want, thank you, Chair. I sent you a message. I guess you didn't see it. I just want to add one thing I forgot about transit. Councillor Bauer brought forward a recommendation, which was very good, and I dealt with Durham Regional Transit, and we were able to modify Route 224 in the summer to bring more people down to down from the GO station to the waterfront, and it was very successful, and so successful that we're looking at bringing it back again this year. So I just wanted to add that, in that we've got a number of tools at our disposal, but that is one of them as well, is to try and persuade people to not use their vehicles. And we did do that one time. It did work well. The region absorbed the cost and it paid for itself. We're going to be doing it again. I won't bring up the potential for an autonomous vehicle right now, but that was something that we talked about too. But I just wanted to add that the transit is also an option, so we don't have to look just at the parking. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Councillor Brown, would you like to respond to that kind compliment from the mayor?
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to say thank you for bringing that up, Mayor Collier. I had forgotten about that, and I'm really happy that that it was a successful pilot, and I think the residents were quite happy with it. So I'm glad it's coming back. That's it, Chair.
Amazing. So no more questions on this discussion topic. Now I need a mover to adopt the recommendation of these reports, or this report, as a matter of fact. Regional Councillor Dies is the mover. All those in favor? I see all hands, therefore none is opposed, and this motion carries. Thank you very much, Director Cooper, Mr. Hannan. The hard work you guys have put throughout the holidays has been acknowledged. We know you did a lot of work. This was a lot of reading, and thank you very much for the hard work you put in. It's acknowledged and noted. Thank you so much. Since there are no presentations today, we'll now move directly into the closed session part of our GGC meeting. Can I get a mover to move into the closed session? Councillor Bauer. All those in favor? I see all hands. This carries.
Mr. Chair, we are live again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Directly, can I get a motion to ratify the direction approved in the closed session? I have motion by Regional Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? I see all hands. The motion carries. And finally, I'd like a mover to adjourn this meeting. Nobody wants to go? Oh, Councillor Bauer. There you go. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.